So he's with this group by first name.
Hey, good afternoon, everybody. I think we'll call this meeting to order. I always feel a little bit strange as a visitor to Fargo, hosting the meeting here in City Hall. But it turns out that we, the Corps of Engineers, are the ones who asked for this meeting. So I guess that makes it appropriate for me to host. So I will offer first a very gracious thanks to Mayor Mahoney and all the city commissioners here for having us today. And it's always a pleasure to be up in the Fargo-Moorhead metro region. And of course, you guys are experiencing a little bit of a flood today. We have with us today Lieutenant General Todd Semonite, who's the Chief of Engineers. So he's in charge of the total engineer force for the United States Army, all components, so the Reserve, the Guard, and the active duty. But more importantly, today, he's in charge of the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. And so bringing him up to speed on the latest on this project and having his support as we go forward is critical to our success. And so we just propose to have a discussion today with the Diversion Authority and get some people's perspectives. Encourage you to ask me or General Semonite tough questions or raise tough issues, because those are the kinds of things that we like to deal with sooner rather than later, so we can get moving with the project. So I think maybe a first thing we should do is go around the table and make some introductions. And we do have a short agenda. It's 5 minutes before 3, I see, and we're here till 3:45, so we've got relatively short amount of time. We'll have some remarks from some of the leadership at the table, and then open it up for discussion 10 minutes from now or so. And so with that, maybe I'll just ask the people at the head table here to introduce themselves quickly.
Sure. Kevin Campbell, Clay County Commissioner and Vice Chair of the Diversion Authority.
Kevin Wilson, I'm the Deputy at the St. Paul District of the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers.
Hi, Terry Williams, Program Manager, Corps of Engineers.
Bernie Dardis, Mayor of the City of West Fargo, and also one of the members of the business leaders.
Rick Steen, Cass County Commission, and a member of the Diversion Authority as well.
Dave Pepcorn, Fargo City Commissioner and Diversion Board member.
Mike Thorstead, West Fargo City Commission and Diversion Board member.
Chuck Henriksen, Moorhead City Council and Diversion Authority member.
Tim Mahoney, Mayor of Fargo, and I'm glad the General went down and looked at our project here next to City Hall. We had one of the top 10 floods we've had in this year, 3505, and everything worked slick. We didn't have any major leak. I was going to have the senator come by and put a finger in there, but we didn't have one.
John Hovind, Senator. Yeah, Todd Semonite, Chief of Engineers, and I look forward to making some comments in a minute.
Mary Sherling, Chair of the Cass County Commission and Chair of the Diversion Authority.
All right, so just thanks everybody. So just for General Semonite's sake, the Diversion Board of Authority, sometimes abbreviated to DA, or the non-federal sponsors in Corps speak, really are a world-class group of individuals and a world-class team supporting this project. They have a whole lot of skin in the game. Again, as we see the flood that is a so-called minor flood today, but really has some significant impacts on the surrounding communities. I mentioned Fargo and Moorhead, but there's also Cass and Clay counties on either side of the Red River, and then the city of West Fargo, a couple representatives, including the mayor here today, which is a critical part of this team as well. So we really do, every once in a while, somebody at maybe Mississippi Valley Division headquarters will say, hey, have you run a model on this? And I say, no, we haven't, but the non-federal sponsors have. And they say, well, wait a minute, they have hydrologists, or they have, you can fill in the blank with, a capability. They have cost estimators? And I say, yeah, they have all that and then more. I mean, so this is a really well-resourced team that is truly committed to not just solving the flooding problem in this region, but to doing it in creative ways, thinking outside the box and finding efficiencies to produce the project more quickly than traditional delivery methods would do, and also at lower costs. Just a little bit more by way of background, the project was on hold for almost 2 years based on an injunction in federal court. But the great news, I think everybody in this room is aware of, is that last Friday we got an order from the judge allowing us to do significant work underneath that injunction. Basically any work in North Dakota that's not going to affect the waters of Minnesota, and that allows us to do a lot. So as of, let's see, it was 2 Fridays ago that we got that injunction modification. But as of last Friday, the Corps of Engineers was able to restart the construction contract for the diversion inlet. And so while you probably won't see heavy equipment out there for a month or two as we mobilize or as the construction contractor mobilizes, they are getting back to work, and the gears are starting to turn on that. We'll see some significant work going on as soon as the weather permits. All right, so for those who don't have a copy of the agenda, we are set to have introductions, opening statements by Commissioner Sherling, by Senator Hoeven, and by Lieutenant General Semonite. So we will start those with Commissioner Sherling.
Well, thank you, Colonel, and thank you so much, General, for joining us today and for your cooperation with this project. We are truly thrilled to get going on it again. Also, thank you, Colonel, for being here, and Terry and Kevin and the rest of your staff. Really appreciate the great working relationship we've had with the Corps of Engineers on this project, and we're excited to go forward now and complete this project that we obviously need so dearly. So would also like to thank Senator Hoeven for joining us today. We've been diligently working with our state legislators in Bismarck to get the additional funding that we need on top of the federal commitment that we've already received, and you have been instrumental in that. We really, really appreciate all of your efforts. The one final piece of that puzzle will be a loan, and I know you're working very, very hard on getting us WIFIA funding also, and that could really be instrumental in saving taxpayers a phenomenal amount of money on this project. So we really appreciate all you do in DC for us. It's really been impressive, the work that you've done and what we've all accomplished together so far. As the Colonel mentioned, we've been undergoing a flood here for the past few weeks and getting ready for that. Things look pretty buttoned up in Fargo, but they really dodged a bullet here, as they seem to do over and over again. But still, 35 feet is a significant flood. In rural Cass County, that meant a lot of overland flooding, and we had a lot of sleepless nights for our staff out there, especially northwest of the metro area, in the Harwood area. There are a couple thousand people that live there, several hundred homes. They were, trying to careen sandbags down gravel roads on trucks in the middle of the night in cold weather and deep ditches filled with water. So it was very treacherous. No one was injured, which is the good news. There were some flooded basements, but the even better news is that 80 to 90% of that area will be protected with this project, and we can't lose sight of that, how important that is. So as the Colonel also mentioned, that injunction was modified a couple weeks ago, and we are ready to roll up our sleeves and get moving with this project. So welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. Thanks to the staff and to the rest of the board members as well.
Thank you, Commissioner. I think Senator Hoeven is up next.
Thanks, Colonel. And I want to thank General Semonite for being here. This is really a chance for him to get out and see the progress that's been made to date. We were out getting around and seeing some of it, and we'll get a chance to see more of it later. And it's remarkable, all the work that has been done. And so, that's fantastic. But either later today or tomorrow morning, we're going to get a chance to see some other areas within the flood project that are flooded this year that won't be when the project's completed. And it's important that you see that. And again, recognize that we still have flooding. There's a lot of folks that had to do sandbagging and other work that's a hardship for them this year that they won't have to do once this is fully built. So again, this is about comprehensive flood protection for the region. And I think that's where y'all have really, for Fargo, Moorhead, Cass County, Clay County, and the whole area, West Fargo, the whole area, the way you've come together to do this is incredibly important, because it is about having flood protection for the region. And we have to keep remembering that, and we have to, even as we look here and see how well this flood protection, and believe that the general describes himself as a muddy boots guy, and he is. We were in Minot, because he said, thank you, General, he signed a chief's report for flood protection in Minot today. Thank you for that. But we were out climbing around the Souris River in the Minot area, and then he was here climbing on a lot of what you've already done, and he can tell you what he thinks, but I think he was pretty impressed. Of course, anytime you come up on any control structure, he goes, does it leak at all? And, you know, the guys are kind of careful how they respond, but just a little bit maybe. But it's fun for him to get a chance to see this, but it's also very important because we continue to press so that we have funding each year to do as much work as we can do each year. You know, we want to try to get this done over the next, is it 6 years, guys? I don't want to overshoot here. Is it 6 or 8 we're planning?
The general was kind of fidgeting a little between 6 and 6.5 years, so they're starting now, and we hope they'll be done by 25.
Right, and I think the general's going to touch on it, but coming over, you know, we talked about the inlet structure, the wild rice control structure, the I-29 bridge, raise the embankment. I think he'll get on that. But if we, you know, we've got the federal funding in place, and with the project account, we'll have the federal funding to do what's close to $200 million worth of work there, I think, and that's federal money. And so we'll keep working, but I want folks to understand that the commitment from General Semonite, as well as the really capable work of people like Colonel Calkins and his team, it's vital for this project, and we can't take it for granted. They've been a big part of it, and his willingness to come out here and, you know, recommit himself to this project, to see the progress, is very, very important to us. That doesn't always happen, and we don't take it for granted. So, again, this is about, you know, moving forward and getting this thing done. General made an interesting comment to me as we were out there walking around here today. He said, you know, you get to see some things started, you get to see some things finished, but it's not often you actually get to see something where it started and it's constructed. Well, that's why we want to get this done in a reasonable period of time, so we all get a chance to see that happen. And, you know, that's what today is about, and we have to stay at it. But the last thing is, again, real credit to everyone involved in this in coming up with a creative solution, local, state, and federal. It takes all the team members to make it happen. So with that, again, General Semonite, thanks for being here. We appreciate having you. Excuse me, having you with us today.
Well, Senator, thanks for those words, and Mayor, thanks again for having me in. I was very, very impressed when I came up here before. Impressed with the magnitude of the project, impressed with the challenges, impressed with the devastation that a lot of your citizens have been through, but probably more impressed with the collaborative atmosphere that both of these states have joined together, and I felt very well received back then. And although I've only been here a couple hours on the ground so far today, same kind of attitude, and I think Fargo-Moorhead's a great place. So listen, just a little bit about me. I'm from a town a lot smaller than this. I live in a small town that's on the Connecticut River in Vermont. It has flooded several times. I'm very, very aware of what flooding's like in rural areas. I understand the devastation that happens. I understand a lot of times you don't have big businesses to be able to bail you back out. The other thing is, the senator said this, but I like to get on the ground. I've been in this job for 35 months. I've been on the road for 140 weeks in a row. So basically, I leave Washington, D.C. Monday night. I go somewhere Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and I got to go back on the Hill to see elected officials on Friday. And so I like to get out and see what's going on. And it's not so much, I get a lot of PowerPoint, a lot of great briefings. Everybody tells me what, you know, life looks like in Washington, D.C., but I've always learned most of getting on the ground, talking to real people, real stakeholders, walk around and see things. So just as an example, when we flew in, we did a couple circles. We flew in a military plane. We could see the devastation, you know, miles and miles out of just all of those farm areas that have been flooded, and much, much more outside of this given area. I was here a couple of years ago. The guys walked me through all the pictures. At the time, you did a great job of educating me on the devastation. But then we just came from 2nd Street North, where the guys are down there working on that pump station. Beautiful big, the wall's all in. You've got the road that goes down there. I can see in where there's great flood control protection down there, but at the same time, there's some natural areas where people can walk around. In the middle of the summer, I'm sure it's nice to get out there and be able to walk around the river. And then we just barely were down on the top of the pump station. The senator and I were up on top of that pump station. You guys don't have a key to that gate, or else you'd probably go up there because it's a great place to be able to look at both ways. It's right behind this building. And we were there for about a half an hour. I got a little bit of briefing from our guys on what's going on. But just to be able to see the structure, to be able to see the drop logs, those are the big aluminum panels that get put in there. And again, I saw what it was like 2 years ago, and to be able to come back now and see where we're at, I think is important. So that's great of where we've been, but I think what's more important is where we're going to go. When I came in, this is a 4-year job. I'm about at the end of my 3rd year. I picked 20 projects that I thought were ones that needed my personal involvement and that had either national significance or such life safety issues that I needed to personally get involved. This project was one of those 20 projects. And it wasn't necessarily a very complicated job with respect to science and engineering. We have a lot of superstars in the Corps. But it was probably very complicated in bringing 2 states together with all the senator talked about the vertical team, local, state, national leaders, and then what's the funding strategy? How do we somehow figure out where we have shared successes or shared diversity on how this thing works out between the 2 states, and to be able to continue to be able to go down this road. And I think this project continues to be a model of what some of the options are available. The federal government can't afford every single thing we have and all the things that are on our plate. So we've got to be able to look at innovative ways of doing something a little bit different. And I still look at this project as one of probably the most innovative flood control projects that we have in the entire nation. This is out of the box, and it's some pretty important stuff. So we got some appropriation a while back. We would have liked to got more, to be honest with you. But right now, we have about $100 million, so we're going to continue to finish up the diversion inlet, $46 million. We've turned that contractor back on. And then Wild Rice, we expect to award that contract by the end of September of 2019, so another 4 or 5 months, and that'll go ahead and continue to work those 2 critical structures. We will continue to champion this in the President's budget. I can't promise what comes out of the President's budget, but we see that once we start a project in the Corps, we'd like to see it through. And we haven't used the word system yet, but these are systems. You might be able to build a couple pieces, but when you talk flood control, if you don't have that entire system put in, then you have gaps and you have voids. And that's where it's great to put a couple pieces in, but I think that we as the federal government should stand by you to continue to see this thing through to completion. So that's where Congress has been exceptionally beneficial to us. Normally, we get about a $5 billion budget in our congressional appropriation. Congress comes in and normally augments that to the tune of about $2 billion. I'm not going to talk for Congress this year. They haven't finished up what that mark's going to be. But if, in fact, they're so inclined to be able to give us some additional money, then I'd like to think that we would come back in what I would call logical increments. We want to be able to build some complete and usable part of a system. So the next logical one, Mayor, would be probably the I-29 bridge and road raise. That could be in the order of merit of 62 million, something like that. We would champion to be able to put that into what we call the work plan. That is that delta from 5 billion to 2 billion. I've got to caution you, that still has to go through Army leadership, and it has to go through OMB, and it has to get approved by the committee. But I just want to have make sure you know that from an engineering perspective, we would think that would be the next logical increment that would be a good value. And then I think the other thing is there's about 23 million that would be above and beyond that, which would be the west embankment, to be able to start building on the west side, to be able to put some of that hardening in some of the channel, to be able to continue to go out there. On 2021 budget, we'll see what happens there, and I think if we continue to work through a work plan, we'll have to see on what happens, but just knowing that you've got, I think, a champion for flood control, not politics, but flood control in Washington, D.C. with the technical expertise of the Corps, and it really is all of your staff as well. I mean, this is everybody working side by side to be able to come together to say, how can we do something to reduce the risk out there? So I'm impressed with what we've done so far, but this is the kind of project, you don't do high fives until the last brick's in the ground, and we aren't there. So although some of these things look great, until we continue to get the system built, which is that 6 or 7 year project, then I think we don't want to rest on our laurels. Let's keep being as aggressive as we can to try to get all the funding you need to get this thing done. I'll stop there, and at some point, Sam, be able to take questions as need be, okay?
Yes, sir. Thank you. I think I'd open it up to the rest of the people at the table. Would anyone like to make any statements? Yeah, please, Dave.
Can I ask a question? So you talked about the bid that would be going out this fall. Is that for the inlet? And then how long would that particular part take?
Terry, do you want to hit that? So I have, Dave, I have a great,
Just have to hit the button.
I have a great statement, so I say to everybody, I didn't get to be a general by being the smartest guy in the room. I got to be a general by finding really smart guys and putting them in a room, okay? So that's where I lean on Terry. Can you answer Dave's question? What specifically is in the scope of work for the inlet, and then what would the wild rice structure entail?
Yeah, so at the inlet, this summer, spring and summer, we would start seeing foundation work done. So deep soil mixing, pile load test, H-pile, sheet pile being driven. Possibly start seeing some mass concrete being poured late fall in the winter. And then next summer or next construction season would be mass concrete in earnest. So you'd start seeing the structure come out of the ground. And gates and machinery hung. And then the following year would probably be turf establishment. So there's also like the maintenance bridge that goes over the top. That's a precast type thing. That'll be brought on site maybe next year. And so the inlet could start seeing that come out of the ground pretty soon. And then the wild rice control structure, we would bid that, put it out for proposals in May, and award a contract in September is the current schedule. Probably wouldn't see a lot of site work until the following spring.
I think the good news, though, is we have the funds. So now we're going to go back into what's a logical way to be able to do this. The weather might have a factor out there. We have been getting great support on contract capability and quality. So I think we will continue to build this through a logical construction process, and we'll keep you in a loop on all of that, okay?
General, I like the words you say, and I kind of like the way you think, because you're talking about money, you're talking about construction, you're starting moving forward. And what we especially had wanted to do with this, Senator Hoven and our congressional delegations, is move forward on a project and have the funding available, and we've talked about that in the past. But truly, this is starting. This is moving now, starting to get some movement and activity. And we think we're excited about it because it's going to be innovative for the Corps. Corps oftentimes takes 18 years to do a project. We're going to up this up and move it a little faster. And then the combination of all us working here locally on the project, Minnesota, North Dakota side, trying to get everything in place. The state is the last thing we have to do for funding. That's what we're working on right now. But the big part of our project is the Corps and the Corps work. So, General, I want to appreciate all you've done for it. I know you and Senator Hoven have worked hard in Washington to make this thing move forward. And to the public, that takes a lot to move that big machinery up in the Washington area. So we're very pleased with this support, and I like the way you think right now. Thank you.
Mayor, there's another critical thing that's happened here, and I won't speak for the Congress, but I'll tell you, I think that Senator Hoven and I feel the same on this. It's one thing to be able to see continued appropriations for projects, but once we start a project, it's a big deal for Congress right now. The President, specifically in his budget, has given us guidance. Once we start something, let's see it through. And we don't have enough money as taxpayers to half build something. We got to be able to see it. So the fact that you've got an appropriation, you've got a new start, and we're beginning to put concrete in the ground, I think that gives you a lot of momentum in future years to be able to make the case, why would we have started something and not see it all the way through? So I think it's really a milestone here that, again, we might have been here a couple of years ago, but now that we're back here and we have the ability to be able to start that momentum and keep it going, I think it speaks very favorable for the project.
Yeah, and I'd add to that. The general's right on, and not only the administration and the Corps, but on Congress's side, so I'm on energy and water appropriations, our chairman, myself, others, and it's not a very big committee, we have a real commitment to projects that are underway, so that we don't end up with these projects out there that are half done. And so, as we look at the work for this year, the items that the general talked about, the diversion inlet, the wild rice control structure, then the I-29 bridge raise, getting that western embankment going. Like I say, we're about $200 million into the project in terms of the federal commitment. We're going to want to continue that out and get it built, not sit with a half-finished project and then start somewhere else. So that's really important in terms of, having projects that are appropriated and having them continue. And we've made that a priority in the committee. So the general's right on, and we'll continue to emphasize that, as well. So that's a really important point. So when we put money in the Corps' work account, that is an emphasis, that you finish those projects that have already been appropriated.
Anyone else have a question or a comment? Okay.
Hey, Sam, so just the other thing, too. I love the mayor, but we're going to be faster than 17 years. I'm not settling for this anymore. We've been around 243 years. I'm revolutionizing the Corps. I've told my guys, we're going quicker, we're going to streamline. But the other thing we're going to do, we want to continue to be transparent. We want to be very open. I'd like to say that we don't make mistakes and we're right up front, but if there's ever a time somebody wants to come see the project, you want a briefing, you want my guys to come to your meetings, if you want to take a Boy Scout troop out and have them look at the project, we are part of your city. We're part of America, and so you keep pushing us hard, and whatever we can do to be exactly what you would expect of us, that's my charter to my 34,000 people, to continue to keep raising the bar on the Corps of Engineers, okay?
Well, I got to warn you, Mary Sherling's sitting next to you, and she's getting the P3 contract bid, and I think her mantra was it has to be done 1 month before the Corps is done.
There you go.
Some healthy competition there. Yeah, I'll say something. I would encourage anybody else who might have a question to write that down so you don't forget it. But one of the big questions on this project has always been permitting. So when we say permitting, most people think of Minnesota, but I would ask you not to forget that North Dakota permits the project as well. So we've had very good relations with the State Water Commission and others. On the Minnesota side, that's where all the attention has been. And of course, the governor's task force, Governor Burgum and Governor Dayton worked very well together, got teams together from people who are for the project, people who are against the project, and worked out what has come to be known as Plan B. And everybody in the room, I think, is well aware of that. But just some of the latest on where we are with the Minnesota DNR. The DNR issued a permit for the project, and that permit has been contested or may be contested in Minnesota State Court. But despite that, as I mentioned before, the judge in the federal case modified the injunction to let us get back to work. So a lot of people have some questions about what that means. And really, from our perspective, what that means is we're going to get back to work, but we're going to respect the Minnesota process, respect the people upstream of the project who are going to be impacted by it, continue working closely with them. And really, it's not me. Again, the people at this table know it a whole lot better than I do. It's the local officials from the counties and the cities here who've been reaching out and working really hard with the upstream coalition, upstream people who are affected by the project. I personally and a lot of people on the Corps team are continuing to work very closely with the Minnesota DNR. So in no way should anybody think that we're just going to, take the judge's ruling and kind of run with the project and not consider the impacts on Minnesota. To the contrary, we're going to continue working very closely with them. In fact, one of the first calls I made after we found out the positive ruling from Judge Thumheim was over to the DNR to reassure them that we were going to keep operating transparently, continuing to communicate with them clearly, answer their questions whenever they had them, and work with them as a team member on this project. Because once this project gets built, it's going to operate for 50 years. I think we generally build pretty good projects. Maybe that's 100 years. And we have to have everybody who's involved with the project, everybody who's affected, buy into that project. And really just want to make clear that we're committed to doing that, committed to continuing to work with all stakeholders, to include Minnesota and the Minnesota DNR.
I'll just add to that yeah, the diversion board and our technical team especially, they're all lined up back there, work frequently, daily perhaps, with the DNR, working on all of these issues. It's not like you get a driver's license and away you go. Both with Minnesota and North Dakota, it's implemented throughout the project, and we will continue to work closely with both North Dakota and Minnesota throughout the permitting process, and we have done that and will continue to do so. On the North Dakota side, another part of the project that we've started is land acquisition. We've started that in earnest, especially in the channel portion of the project, so that we can get that land acquired ahead of the P3 start. And so our goal is to get that land acquired by next spring, a year from now. And also we've been visiting with folks that would like to move sooner than that are perhaps in the retention area. We've also been visiting with landowners regarding flowage easements in the retention area as well. So that's a big part of this project. You know, not everybody is happy about this project if they're negatively affected, and we want to try to make this as easy for people as possible. We never lose sight of that, and we're constantly reaching out to people if anyone feels that they need more information from us or they should be contacted, and we haven't. The project has been modified over the years, so sometimes you might have been affected and now you're not. So I really encourage people to contact us, go to our website and look at the maps. But we're excited to get moving forward on that process as well. There's been several people that have been held in limbo for several years that really wanted to get their land acquired, and so we've been happy to be able to do that in the last few months.
Thank you. And anyone else? Kevin?
Yeah, I want to touch base a little bit on the Minnesota side. I know Commissioner Sherling's talked about the area, for example, in the northwest part of the county that experienced trouble in this last flooding. And in some of our rural areas, Georgetown and Comstock and Wolverton have also experienced some issues with flooding. And I think it's, you know, we've made it clear that as part of this project and part of regional flood protection, we want to work with those communities as well. And a lot of it hopeful that'll be part of this project. The work in Georgetown, the work in Wolverton, and so I look forward to that continued communication. I know that you were talking, Colonel, about the DNR permit, and that permit itself had several conditions, and our intentions are to meet all those conditions. And one of the conditions was working with, you know, the city of Wolverton, you know, on issues affecting them. So I look forward to that dialogue moving forward, and we certainly look for your help in that regard to help move that process forward. And again, thank you, General, for being here, and I'm really glad to hear your timeline is good. So thank you.
All right, anyone else? Okay, we don't have to be here till 3:45. I will say, though, that the Corps of Engineers contingent will be here probably till about 4 o'clock. So if anybody has personal questions that you want to ask, please feel free to approach any of us. And then I will give everybody at the head of the table here a chance to make any closing comments. It looks like Mayor
Well,
Mahoney.
maybe you could have a press conference afterwards, 10 minutes after we adjourn. Maybe if people have questions, we could have you guys over at the stair. So the General and Senator, if anybody had any questions from the press, we could probably do that.
Sounds good. All right. Senator Hoeven, any closing remarks?
Well, just again, thanks. I mean, every time the head of the Corps of Engineers, I mean, Colonel, we love seeing you too, don't get me wrong. You're fabulous, and your team's fabulous, so don't feel
Thanks,
underappreciated.
Senator.
But last I checked, the, Chief of Staff for the Corps of Engineers, there's a lot of places he has to be all over this country. So every time he comes out here and makes this an area of emphasis, it speaks very loudly. And we are deeply appreciative. Thank you for all your work.
Well, Senator, to you and the mayor and just everybody, I just reiterate, whatever we can do, we're all in. And I'm not convinced you need a lot of help up here in North Dakota. Probably the biggest area you need help is the senator and I to help you down in D.C. And as long as we can keep the money coming, I think you got enough smart people up here to put it in the ground, okay?
Thank you.
Thanks, sir.
Thanks again to the Diversion Authority and the City of Fargo for hosting us, and we'll have a press availability at 3:40.
Could we just do a round of applause, because the general doesn't come here very often?
Round of applause.
I agree.